Throughout the 20th and the 21st centuries, a number of social reformers have argued that the principal aim of education ought to be about redressing social inequalities. These are inequalities that are based upon the way that society is organised, the way it distributes its benefits unequally, and that arise out of dominant cultural understandings about what certain groups of people are like. We're talking here about inequalities of class, race, and gender. While these are based in culture and in social structure, they were often justified, as we will see in a later module, through reference to nature. The idea was that if you fixed inequalities in education, you would fix inequalities in society. These views drew heavily upon the modern value of equality, the view that one's social standing should not be set at birth, as it had been in the feudal age. In the feudal age, if your father was a peasant, well then you would be a peasant for the remainder of your life. That was your lot. But rather that all people were born equal. Accordingly, everyone, every child, should be given equal educational opportunity. One version of this view was known as the meritocratic approach. This was highly influential in the early part of the 20th century, right the way through to the 1950s. The basic idea here was that if you gave every child between the ages of 6 and 14 the same education, well then disadvantages based on race, class, and gender would be put out of business. They would no longer impede the child's progress. If some children subsequently did better than others, well then this was due to their native endowment of talent and their propensity of hard work. And they merited the success that came their way. By the 1950s, it was becoming clear that the same groups of disadvantaged students were still performing more poorly than their more advantaged counterparts. Advocates of the meritocratic approach then started to turn their attention to the cultural backgrounds of these disadvantaged students themselves, and they argued that there was something in this culture that was holding these students back, that they didn't have the right values, they lacked the right type of motivation. Accordingly, programs were put in place. Operation Head Start in the United States is a notable one, in order to inoculate students against the negative effects of their home cultures. These were largely unsuccessful, in large part because they devalued the life experiences of the children. They found nothing familiar in their schooling, and it adopted a pejorative view towards the cultures of their parents. The failure of these programs gave a spur to alternative social justice approaches. In a way, what these approaches attempted to do was to turn things around, placing the emphasis on the failings of school culture rather than the home culture of disadvantaged students. Schooling, they argued, needed to be made more relevant to the life experiences and cultural backgrounds of disadvantaged students. Moreover, cultural biases built into the education system itself, the way that the curriculum and the way that teaching practices reflected the beliefs and the values, the expectations and the aspirations of white middle-class students. The French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu noted that when people grow up in roughly similar cultural environments, They acquire similar ways of thinking, similar tastes, a similar way of dressing, a manner of speaking, even walking to each other. And they feel more comfortable in the company of each other. Bourdieu also wrote extensively about education. And he argued that the overwhelming number of teachers, in his case, in the French education system, were white and middle class. And this enabled them to both feel more comfortable with and communicate more effectively with white middle class students. Throughout the 1960s, 70s, and into the 80s, there emerged a whole range of studies looking at the ways that teachers interacted with different groups of students, the amount of attention they gave them, how often they gave them an opportunity to speak, the way that they often would judge students unwittingly on the basis of their dress, their manner of speech, and so forth. What the social justice advocates argue is that it is not enough to give everyone the same education and expect that that will help redress inequalities in society as a whole. What you need to do is to direct more resources towards disadvantaged students, and in particular to ensure that the curriculum reflects and accommodates their life experiences and cultural backgrounds.